On this episode of Healthcare Heartbeat, resumes. What should go on them? What shouldn't go on them? And why they're important to your journey as an international healthcare professional.
You are listening to Healthcare Heartbeat, brought to you by Avant Healthcare Professionals.
So we're talking all about your resume on this episode of Healthcare Heartbeat. And to join me, Anna Johansson from Global Growth. Hi.
Hello, Ross.
So you're manager in our Global Growth department.
Yes.
Okay. And you've been here for 6 years?
Yeah, just over 6 years.
Okay. Now, and I think you said you started in recruitment.
I did, yeah.
Okay.
So when I started about 6 years ago, I started in the recruitment department as a recruiter. So I've held a couple different roles in the recruitment team. I was there for about 3 years, and then I moved over to the Global Growth team. But Global Growth at Avant is very recruitment adjacent. So we've always been kind of a part of the recruitment team. So I'm still very involved.
This is a topic kind of because you had brought this discussion topic up to me and our producers. And along the way in my long career, I actually many moons ago was also a recruiter. So this is something I'm also very passionate about, and that's discussing resumes, right? We've both spent that time sitting at a computer,
reading a lot of resumes,
hundreds of resumes, sometimes in a day. Like you go through and you look at them, and you've kind of seen it all, right? For better or worse,
exactly.
Right? And so what we're going to do today is focus a lot on the how do you make it better. We are going to address some of the worse,
sure,
right? Because listen,
that's how you learn.
You might be making these mistakes, right? And that's what we're here for. And that's by extension what Avant is here for. Our programs are designed to work with international healthcare professionals to help you navigate all the components of getting from where you are now to becoming a healthcare professional in the United States. Yep. And the application stage is one of, if not the first step. And with that is the resume. And that's why you want to talk about it in this session, right? Because it's really important.
Yeah, you can't apply without a resume.
100%, right? So what we're going to be talking about are, really some of the key things you need to know, mistakes you might be making, right? And then we also have put together a template resume that you can download totally for free and use, right? And you can make it your own. By no means do you have to just use it exactly as is, but we wanted to at least give you a tool to help you be successful when it comes to crafting your resume.
Great place to start.
Absolutely. A great start, right? So is there anything else I missed that we're going to hit in this episode?
I think you covered it.
I covered it all. And we're going to cover it all about resumes in this episode, Healthcare Heartbeat.
No words can explain how thankful I am for giving me this opportunity na makapagtrabaho sa United States kasi this changed my whole life. I promised to myself din when I was studying na I was born poor, but I will never die poor. This is not just for me, but also for the people who supported me, which is my family. So this sacrifice is for them.
I'm from Jamaica.
I am from the Philippines.
And I've been practicing in the United Kingdom.
I'm from South Africa. I wanted to be a part of world-class healthcare. I mean, that's in the US. So then becoming an RN in the US would help me to reach that goal.
A better future, to improve my nursing skills and then grow my nursing career as well. And this was the best opportunity to do that. The United States will
give me more opportunity to grow as a nurse and also to earn more.
I would advise them to choose Avant because it gives them a process to becoming a USRN.
Don't give up on that dream.
Be dedicated to your dream.
Keep on going. The dream will happen. Just believe in yourself.
That would be my only recommendation. Sign up with Avant.
So if you're new to Healthcare Heartbeat, go ahead and subscribe. I don't know what you're waiting for. But we've also actually done an episode all about the entire recruitment process. So absolutely go back and check that episode out because it's super informative as far as the journey, if you will. And when we talk about the resume, it's right there at the beginning, essentially, of the process, which is application. So Anna, what does the recruitment team do with a resume?
Great question. I mean, it's what you would expect, right? We read it to understand your work experience, your education, your credentials, things like that. The recruitment team does use it at various stages of the recruitment process. So step number 1 is the application review. When you submit your application, we look at the information you provided and we compare that to the information provided in your resume, kind of filling in the gaps because we ask questions in the application for information that we need, but the resume provides kind of a deeper explanation to those things, like where you're working, what kind of skills you have, what your role is actually like. So that's the first step is the application review. Then if you move forward to the next step, that's the interview process. So your recruiters, the ones you're actually going to talk with on the phone, will be referencing your resume too to understand, again, your work experience, your education, your skills, criteria, all that stuff. So yeah, your resume is pretty much used at every stage. And then the final review of your file to determine if we can offer you onto our program, we're, again, looking at your resume. So if you haven't understood, it's a very important piece of document that needs to be, accurate, updated, clear, and give us information about all the experience and education that you have so that we can kind of understand who you are as a nurse on paper. The interviews, of course, will go into a bit deeper into who you are as a person.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the few things that, to your point, comes along at multiple steps of the journey.
Yeah, every single person in recruitment is looking at that resume at some point.
Which is why we wanted to focus on it, because having a well-written resume that represents you as a candidate, as a professional, as a healthcare professional, is critically important to all these various steps throughout the process.
100%.
So let's step it back for 1 second. What is a resume? Right? The most basic, maybe we should have started with that, but what is a resume?
Yeah, a resume is what you might call a CV. It's a summary of your experiences, your education, your credentials, certifications, demographic information, pretty much a snapshot of your professional experience.
And I think this is something that we get a lot online, and it's the difference, similarities, a CV versus a resume. And this is also something that there's a little bit of differences even internationally versus just domestically in the US, right? So what's kind of the difference between a CV and a resume?
Well, I'll say this first. In the US, you rarely hear about CVs unless it's academia, really. I think most professionals in the United States would refer to that piece of paper or the document as a resume. So if you're an international nurse applying to a company in the US, you can submit a resume or a CV as long as it provides that summary of information. But yeah, a CV is typically a lot longer. It is very detailed, but again, mainly used for academic pursuits. So if you're applying to be like a nurse educator or something like that, you might use a CV here. But in terms of job searching, you're mainly going to be using a resume, which is typically a 1-page summary. But it can be up to 2 pages, I've also learned. And 2 pages if you have extensive experience, or for nurses specifically who have a lot of certifications and training and things like that, and you want to make sure all of it is included, a resume that's 2 pages is okay as well.
So, talking about a resume, what are the key things, right? You've kind of hit them at a high level. Let's dig a little deeper, right? Like, what are the key things that should go on a resume?
So first and foremost, at the very top of your resume, you'll want to have your name.
Oh, that's
First
an
and last
important
name.
part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Full legal name is preferred on a resume.
Sure.
If you do go by a nickname, you can definitely include that. Again, we love seeing personal details in a resume. It kind of gives us a bit more information about who you are. So you can put that information there. Contact information, super, super important. So an email address that is accessible by you, one that we will be using through communication throughout the entire recruitment process. A phone number is also very important. And obviously here at Avant, we're dealing with international applicants. So if you can include the country code to your phone number, that's also a good tip.
Yeah. And I know in some cases, also people, the phone number, but additionally, I know like WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Right. Is that like,
yeah,
the primary way to get in contact with you, knowing that, and we did talk about this in the process episode, that most of our initial conversation or communication with you is going to be through email.
Yes. Email is very important throughout this process. Even once on the Avant program, email is going to be number one.
Yeah. What about, you'd mentioned 1 to 2 pages. Is there a preference? Are there even preferences here at Avant, or maybe even you as a recruiter had when you were looking at all those resumes? Were there types of things that you were like, oh, this is a really helpful thing, or this is something that knowing really helps the candidacy?
Mm-hmm. I would say for me personally, I don't have a preference whether it's 1 page or 2 page, as long as the information is succinct and clear. So if you have been working at 10 different hospitals, I would like to see all of that.
Yeah.
And if it takes you 2 pages to write that out, that's totally fine. What I would prefer not to see is elaboration for the sake of filling up space.
Yeah.
Right? So
sure.
If the information on the resume is helpful, it supports the information that you're trying to share, then that's great. That's fine. If it turns out to be a little bit longer. But adding a bunch of fluff, I would prefer to I'd rather
it be shorter than longer, right? It's like, I mean, and I think that's the other thing too, when we're looking at the whole with a resume, there is kind of a leaning towards, if you have the ability to be succinct and keep it to a page, there's a strong always preference for that. I think you hear almost too much that they must be 1 page.
Yeah.
Like having been in the recruiting circles and things like that, I'm not a firm believer in that. I think of one situation particularly is if you have been working for over 10 years, and this is just kind of a rule of thumb. This is not a hard and fast rule, but if you've been working in an industry for over 10 years and maybe you've had different roles that have different responsibilities, right? Or maybe you started and you weren't a manager and then you became a manager. Like you see that kind of, like, that's when you start to get into that 10-year plus in the same industry, when it becomes understandable that a resume and with the certifications for nurses, or even any other international healthcare professionals, that the resume may creep into a 2-page, right? But I think where it starts to draw the line is, okay, are we getting into like 5 pages? That feels a little bit much.
Well, now it seems more closer to a CV.
Correct.
And, again, there's nothing wrong with a CV. If you already have a CV that you've created, because that might be the standard in the country that you're living and working in, you can still submit that. Don't get me wrong. At Avant, we are happy to receive your CV instead of a shortened resume. But again, just making sure that the information that's provided in there makes sense, that it's actually contributing to our ability to learn more about you and the skills and the experience that you have, and not just fluff.
Yeah. I think one other thing that we were especially mindful of when we put together the template, the resume template that you can download for free on our website, go grab it, make it your own, but at least it's a good starting point, is formatting.
Yeah.
Right? Formatting is your friend, right? From everything from what's bold, what's italicized, what's on the right side, what's on the left side, being very thoughtful with how a resume is organized and by extension formatted
Yeah.
really helps us as former recruiters, but helps our current recruiters also, I think, really go through the information quickly and efficiently.
Yes. So that's one thing I didn't even think about before now, but I'm glad you said it, because if you bold or highlight or somehow draw attention to the main key points, which in my head I'm thinking is like dates of experience, employer, and job title. If those things kind of are bolded, then my eyes are immediately drawn to that. And now I can do a quick glance over the entire resume, understand the basics of that person's experience and their journey. And then now I kind of know, okay, these are the jobs that you've had. This is the journey you've been through. And then if I need to know more about any of those specific positions, now I can go in and read those bullet points listed under there and understand more about what you did in that role. That's a really good point.
I think one thing that's really important also for those of you out there who are applying for programs like Avant's, and even other jobs, even in your home countries, is that the recruiters for these roles, maybe going through hundreds, if not, in our case, thousands of applications, sometimes in a day, right? I mean, and so what we as recruiters do is you do learn and you get that skill of scanning resumes, right? And that is really where that formatting helps, because you make it easier on the recruiter to find out how awesome you are.
And this is really your first impression.
Oh, yeah.
So every applicant is going to submit a resume. The resume is what gets looked at first. You don't get an interview before we look at your resume.
Correct.
So if your resume is easy to read and we like what we see, it's easy to understand your experience, the experience is what we need or what we want, then your chances are going to increase of then getting a call.
You make it easier for the recruiter to move you to the next step.
Yeah.
And after all, isn't that what we're trying to do here, right? I mean, that's what your end goal should be, is how do I position myself, share all the information about me, but you have to be mindful on how do I make it easier on the people reviewing this to understand who I am as a candidate and figure out if I'm a good fit or not, right? And so, again, I want to reiterate, that's why we put together this template for you as a really great starting point. You can grab it on our website. It's totally free. We'll put the link down in the description. Absolutely encourage you to go grab that. And again, it's a really great starting point, right? So we've hit a lot of what to include. Now maybe you're doing some of these. Right? So listen up to this part. What do we not encourage people to include on their resume?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this, but to make it a little easier, I'm going to visually think about the format of the resume and start at the top. So we talked a little bit about what to include in terms of name, demographics, contact information. That's all great. You can definitely include like an address, a country that you're living in, working in. Some things that you can leave out just for space saving would be things like gender, marital status, height, weight. I can't tell you how many resumes I've seen with that information, and it's fine if you include it. It's definitely not bad.
Sure.
But again, if we're trying to keep the resume as succinct as possible, let your recruiters see the information that they need, those are some things that you could leave out.
Yeah.
Pictures, I know, is something that I feel like depends on who you talk to.
It's hard, right? Because I think in a lot of creative fields, certainly not to say that what y'all do as healthcare professionals,
Nurses
you have a ton of
creativity.
they're sometimes creative, but it's a little bit more of the standard in, if I'm a graphic designer or something like that. So I think you see it more often, right? But what are some of the things as far as pictures go or have come across on resumes?
I think including a photo is fine. Again, if there's space for it, don't include it just because you think you have to. But if there's space and you want to, then great.
Yeah.
Some things to keep in mind, though, is that photo must be professional. So some good examples are like I've seen nurses post pictures of them from their nursing graduation where they're in their full nurse setup. I love those. Or just professional in a suit or a nice blouse. What I don't like to see are photos that maybe like a selfie. Definitely would not do a selfie.
Not great.
Would not do something in, I had this one applicant that when I was reviewing the resume, at first glance, it's just a photo of some person in a t-shirt. I was like, okay, it's not professional, but at least it maybe looked like a passport back, like photo type thing. But at closer look, I could see the text written on his shirt, and it was not very appropriate.
Okay.
So that I would say just it leaves a bad taste in your recruiter's mouth, and it could be something that costs you a job interview.
Sure. What about a candidate in their Halloween costume?
Depends on the job, I would say. If you're applying for a circus, that might.
Yeah, but probably not for us, right? So again, keep it professional, right? If you're going to include a photo, I think a photo can add a certain amount of personalization, for sure, right? But again, I just want to reiterate, it's not something that needs to go on your resume.
Right.
It is not a mandatory component of a resume.
Correct.
It's if you want to include it, you can, but it's not something that would improve your chances of moving forward or being, well, I guess in some cases, maybe rejected. It may not help your case depending if it's a bad photo, but
and
or
that's
unprofessional photo.
That's why I bring it up.
Yeah.
So it's not a requirement, but if you're going to do it, make sure you do it right because it could have negative consequences if done incorrectly or inappropriately.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's a good list of things that you want to be mindful of not including. I think they're also. And this is, again, not a hard and fast, but sometimes you also have people who are like, oh, my hobbies, things like that.
Which, again, is okay. It adds a bit of personality. But if we're trying to keep a resume succinct and concise and to the point, I think you can leave out your hobbies for a professional application if you're applying to the U.S. Because I do see that a lot in resumes that we get. And I think it's great. I think it's, fun to see what they're into. But, again, my goal as a recruiter is to see if you're qualified for our program.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that you love to surf. I love that you love to sing.
Yeah. And I think that's something, it's interesting you bring that up because it is one thing that, again, I just want to point your attention to the previous episode we did about the process. And when we talked about the interview, right? My guest on that show, Sarah, mentioned, listen, it's okay to show a little personality.
Oh, definitely.
Right? And so I think that there's room for some of that in the interview, right? But, the resume is what gets you to the interview. So it's really important to be very thoughtful of what is on the resume and that you have limited like real estate and space. You have limited space, right? So we want to be very thoughtful about what we're including on there.
One thing you could do if you want to add a little flair and personality to your resume is change the colors,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
If you want your name to be bright pink because pink's your favorite color, that's one way to kind of add some personality flair. But again, just making it easier for your recruiter.
Probably avoid yellow.
Something that's going to be easy to read.
Easy to read is key.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, some other things that I think that you could leave out of your resume. We talked about, if you have extensive past experience, if your experience from 10 years ago is unrelated to the field that you are currently applying for, I think that's something that you can leave out.
Yeah.
So if you are now a nurse applying for a nursing job in the United States, but maybe when you first got out of college, let's say you went into marketing and you worked, 5 years as a marketing associate.
Sure.
That's great. That's really cool to know. Maybe then you went back to school, did a career change. For your nursing resume that you're creating for a future nursing job, it's okay to only include the related nursing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great tip because I know we certainly have many people who come through our program that, a lot of them nursing was like the first calling and first love, but you absolutely have people who find their way to it at different points in their life after, I was in marketing or I was in accounting or I was in whatever it is. So I think that's great advice because, again, that does help with the limited space, if you will, of trying to keep a resume to 1 to 2 pages, ideally.
Oh, but that made me think of something else. So if you were the kind of person who went to nursing school, graduated, and after graduation decided not to go into the nursing field and you did something different and then returned, that would be a good example of where I might put a note saying like, not that it was a gap per se, but it's a nursing experience gap. So just kind of explaining what you were doing during that time. I think that is fine to put. But again, we don't need a ton of detail. I don't need to know about the daily duties and specific job tasks that you had when you were in your marketing role. But just knowing that, hey, I went into marketing after my nursing degree for whatever reason, and now I've returned to nursing. I think that's good to include there, because one of the questions that your recruiter is likely going to have when they look at that is, why is there a 6-year gap?
Why? Oh, yeah. That's a great point. It's kind of the reverse of if you don't go initially or immediately into nursing, that's a great point. Like explaining that time, right? Because you're right. As a recruiter, if we saw that gap, it'd be the first, like, what's going on here? Like, why did you not? And it may be a totally logical explanation.
Most of the time it is.
Most of the time it is, right? So just put that down on paper and explain it. So all of these factors, all of these things, what's your best advice? We have an international healthcare professional out there listening to this episode, watching this episode. They're going to sit down and work on their resume. What's the best advice you have for them on how to get their, I say resume noticed, if you will, but how to really truly make it relevant?
So you'll see in the template, the resume template, that we organize the job from reverse chronological order. So you want to put your current experience at the very top, because what you're doing now is going to matter most to the person reviewing your application. So putting things kind of in a reverse chronological order, no other way to say it. That's number one. And then when it comes to elaborating on things like skills, tasks, duties, things that you do at work, doing that only for, again, your current job is sufficient. Then that way you can work your way backwards, listing the previous experience that you've had. And it's really just clear to the recruiter, but having kind of a drill down of what you do on a day-to-day does help for your current job, because those are the questions that we're going to need to know and ask you about. So having that right then and there on your resume is just going to make the review a lot easier.
What's your take on, so let's say in my current role, I'm doing a specific task, right? But in my previous role, I did that same task, right? Should I include it twice?
I don't think so.
Right?
I think as long as you include, as a nurse specifically, important things to include would be start and end date for each role that you have. So if you change units, change, positions, things like that, just being really accurate with the dates, including, again, your employer or the healthcare facility you're working at, the unit that you're working in, and the role that you have. So if you're a staff nurse, senior staff nurse, nursing officer, whatever that specific title is or official title that you hold, have that in the resume for each of the positions that you have. So those are kind of the basics that you want to have. But for your current experience, explaining a little bit about the hospital, telling us, how many beds does it have, what kind of units there are, like what kind of cases that hospital as a whole can see, and then narrowing it down to your specific unit and role.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So if you are at this stage of looking to be a international healthcare professional, a nurse, what have you, in the United States, absolutely, first, go grab that resume template. Again, we'll put the link in the description to that for you to grab that. It's totally free. So grab that. And then once you work on your resume, hopefully apply some of the things you've learned today. The next important step would be to apply. So go to our website, go to Avant's website, go there, apply today. That's the first important step in the process, right? But you do need to have your resume ready for that, because it is something, as we mentioned, that kind of goes with you along the entire journey here to get to and to work in the U.S. And is there anything else that you'd like to add before we let our viewers and listeners get back to their day and hopefully maybe work on their resume a little bit?
Sure. So one thing I was thinking of, because again, I'm just picturing this template in my head. We talked about demographics or contact information. We talked about work experience, education. Again, just including the nursing specific education. That's totally fine. Don't need to include much else. You can include your post-secondary or high school experience because that is something that's required for the United States process. But we'll ask for that information too. But then lastly, any sort of credentials or certifications that you have specific to the United States. And, you know, if you've done post-grad specializations and things like that, definitely include that. But if you've completed an English proficiency exam at any point in time in your life, it's really good to have that, you know, the date that you took the exam, which exam you took, and what scores you received. Don't be assuming what's pass or what's fail because that changes over time. So just having that on there is a good information for your recruiter to see, you know, where your English level might be at. If you do speak other languages, that's cool information to know, but really English is the big one for the United States. Otherwise, or other than that, you could do, like if you've taken the NCLEX or if you've even applied to take the NCLEX, whatever steps that you've completed, include that in your resume again, so that we know what you've done or what stage you're at so that we can hopefully help you with the rest of that process. Or know that you've already met a major milestone of the
maybe
U.S.
you passed
process.
them. Right? That's absolutely useful to know in this.
And not just the United States. If you are a nurse who's already working abroad in a different country and you're licensed in other countries as well, make sure to include that information. It is important for immigration. And just if you are currently working in a different country, making sure that that's clear somewhere in your resume. So if you've had prior experience in one country, when you're listing out your, you know, employers and things like that, at the end there, just put a little in parentheses, maybe the country, if it's different, if you have experience in different parts of the world.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of Healthcare Heartbeat. Again, if you have not already, wherever you are listening to this, please subscribe. Leave a review. If you have a comment, you can reach out to us. We love all of that. And thank you, Anna, for joining me and really going through all this amazing resume know-how tips and also, you know, the kind of the stuff not to do. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. This has been Healthcare Heartbeat by Avant Healthcare Professionals, the leader in international healthcare staffing and recruitment, where we change the lives of healthcare professionals every day. To learn more about how our healthcare professionals can help your facility, visit AvantHealthcare.com and be sure to subscribe to this show wherever you get your podcasts.